Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. The latest volume of Kowabana, Volume 14, is now out. Collecting even more of your favourite stories from the show, you can find tales of creepy monsters, terrifying ghosts, bizarre curses, haunted buildings, and much, much more. That's Kowabana Volume 14, out now. This week, we're continuing our spooky tour of Japan and heading to the Kansai area. Here, you can find Japan's ancient capital, and all sorts of ancient spooks to go with it. But first, this story from a school in Kyoto speaks of an old legend that you mustn't turn around if you're near a certain beach. But what happens when some school kids come across, it seems, that very same legend for real? Find out in Inaho-san. This happened at an old school in Maizuru in Kyoto. At our school in Kyoto, when you hit the 3rd grade, you get to go on a small trip for one night that they call overnight training. Basically, we spend the night at a Japanese inn next to our school in Maizuru, and the next day we can play at the beach all day. And so, when I was in the 3rd grade, I also took part. The first day was recreational activities, and then we spent the night at the inn. Everyone was rather well behaved, and nobody did anything stupid either, so we soon all got into bed. As is customary for these types of trips, we put all our mattresses together and then told scary stories. Let me share one of the stories our classmate told us. Several years before our trip, there was a student by the name of Inaho-san who drowned. She was always being bullied by people in her class who were violent against her. She always talked to a boy in the grade below her, and, despite the bullying, she went to school just to see him. As such, she intended to skip that same trip we were on, because it meant she wouldn't be able to see him. However, her teacher and parents forced her to go, and so she had no other choice. When she refused to go to the beach on the 2nd day, her classmates bullied her and dragged her into the water. As a result, she passed away, and even now, during this time of year, she crawls out of the sea and takes back with her any students or teachers that she happens to come across in front of the school. But before she appears, you can always hear a rapping sound coming from the beach. If you happen to be walking around in that area and you hear the sound, then you mustn't turn around. If you do, she'll be standing there with a creepy look on her face, waiting to take you back with her. There's only one way to get rid of her, and that's to keep walking in the direction of the sound. Meaning, you have to walk towards the water and then scream, "The overnight training is over!" Only then will she leave. The story went something like that. At the time, I thought it was a pretty regular ghost story, and honestly, some of the stories the other students told were scarier. There was just one person who believed all the stories were true, and he shivered under the blankets in fear. Later that night, 2 students went to the toilet, but only one came back, and he was shaking like a leaf. The teacher on patrol rushed into the room to ask him what was wrong, and he said he heard a rapping noise. Everyone who had just heard that ghost story earlier turned pale. "Where's the other guy?" I asked. It was the same guy who was terrified by all the stories earlier. "I lost him on the way," he muttered. And so all the teachers set out to find him. We only learnt what happened later when we heard a police car stop in front of the school. A few police officers came in and we all rushed over to the front door to ask what was happening. But the guy who had gone missing was there, answering their questions. Apparently, after he heard that sound, he suddenly turned around and ran, but he heard another person's footsteps, so that made him even more afraid. And so he did what he heard in the story, and ran towards the sound. When he reached the rear of the school, he saw a person holding a torch that they were trying to light, so he screamed, "The overnight training is over!" Then he ran, and someone who lived near the school grabbed him and informed the police. It turned out that there had been an attempted arson attempt the previous week, so the residents and police were already on high alert. And that rapping sound he heard was probably the person trying to light the torch on fire. I later heard it was a student who graduated from our school the previous year who was trying to burn it down. If nobody noticed what he was doing, then chances were good the entire school and the inn next to it, where we were staying, would have burnt down. But thanks to that scary story, we were saved. Everyone was shocked by the coincidence. When we told one of the teachers about it, apparently they used to actually teach Inaho-san long ago. She was the class mood maker, they said. The other girls were jealous of her, so that was a story they made up. But it was true that she had a boyfriend in the grade below her, and each time there was an event, she complained that she didn't want to go because she wouldn't be able to see him. More than 10 years have passed since then. And, for better or worse, that was the last time something strange happened to me. A university student in Kyoto comes across something strange at his apartment one night. Something so baffling that he still doesn't understand it to this day. Find out why in The Kanji That Doesn't Exist. This happened during my first year of university in Kyoto. I started living alone for the first time in an apartment on the 5th floor. One of my friends also lived in an apartment on a different floor. Neither of us had lived alone before, and we didn't have any other friends yet, so we often visited each other's apartments to hang out. My apartment was poorly ventilated, and in summer it was incredibly hot and humid, typical of the basin area we lived in, so it was unbearable. As such, I always left the door open just a few centimeters to let some air in. But that was a little careless, so I used the U-shaped door latch without locking the door and put a newspaper between the door and the ground to keep it open just a few centimeters. When I went to bed, I took the newspaper out and just left the door latch on. I figured that if anyone pulled the door from outside, it would only open a few centimeters anyway, so they wouldn't be able to get in. But sometimes, my friend would try to visit me even though it was late at night. He didn't know the latch was on, so when he pulled the door really hard, the latch would get caught, and it would make this massive noise. That always woke me up, and several times I had to let him in while rubbing my sleepy eyes. One night, I was exhausted from work, and as soon as I got home, I climbed into bed and immediately fell asleep. When I was in the deepest part of my sleep, suddenly, a loud bang woke me up. Of course, I was extremely tired, and although it might have been a little rude to my friend, I didn't open the door for him and just went straight back to sleep. But after that, I heard that same banging sound another 5 times. "Sorry, I'm too tired today. You really should go home," I thought, and again fell asleep. The next morning, I went to visit my friend. When I mentioned the night before, he said that he didn't come to my apartment last night. "Quit trying to scare me," I said. but he really didn't seem to be lying about it. "I must have been dreaming then," I said. But when we returned to my apartment together, my friend suddenly screamed. I jumped in surprise, but I turned to see what he was looking at, and my front door was covered in faint writing. I counted the characters, and it was 13 down and 9 across. The characters were written neatly, like a table. But the most surprising part of all was that these characters, every single one, appeared to be kanji that didn't actually exist. They had an odd number of strokes, and I knew the various parts that made them up, but I'd never seen them used together like that before. It was weird and creeped both of us out. I wanted to run inside immediately to grab a rag to get rid of them, but that morning I went to my friend's apartment without locking my door behind me. In the 10 or 20 minutes I was gone, someone could have gone inside and was still there waiting for me. As soon as I thought it, I couldn't go in. The two of us ran from the building in a panic. In the end, I asked another friend to come back with us during the day and check it together. Thankfully, nothing happened and no one was there, and that's the one thing I'm grateful for. Some school kids on a field trip hear an interesting legend about Sannenzaka, but when one of them falls victim to it, they start to wonder if maybe it's not just a legend. Find out why in Sannenzaka. When I was in junior high, I went to Kyoto for a school trip. There's a hill near Kiyomizu Temple called Sannenzaka, and there's a legend that states if you fall down there, then you'll die in 3 years. Our guide told us that because numerous pregnant women visit the area to pray to Kannon, the guardian of childbirth, for a safe delivery, the legend exists to warn them not to trip on the hill. Sannenzaka is made of stone paving, so I remember thinking it would probably be pretty slippery in the rain. We visited it on a chilly but clear autumn day, but one of my friends still tripped and fell down. "Oh no, this is bad!" everyone screamed. We helped my friend up, but of course nobody actually believed the legend. "Oh man, I tripped on Sannenzaka," my friend said, and after that we kept joking about it. We arrived at Kiyomizu Temple, and my friend even told the bus guide that she tripped. "I fell over. I'm probably going to die now," she said with a laugh. The next day, the bus guide gave my friend a charm and a gourd strap. "Even if you trip, this gourd will protect you, so you'll be okay," she said. My friend wasn't especially concerned with what happened, so she was surprised when she received it, but she was also grateful. "You didn't have to do that," she said. But honestly, it wasn't very cute, so she put it in her bag and left it there. When we got back from our trip, the tale of her falling down on Sannenzaka was all the talk around school for a while. "Hey, what happened to that gourd?" someone asked her, and she took it out of her bag. It was still there in the packaging. "I still have it," she said. She took it out of the packaging and showed it to everyone. The gourd had a lid, and inside there were 6 smaller gourds and a few other small things like an old golden Edo coin, a sea brim figure, and a ceremonial arrow. That next April, we went to an affiliated high school. I was in a different class to my friend, but she would tell the new students there what happened on our trip as she showed them the gourd. "It's so cute! And there are 4 more gourds inside it," one of the girls said as she was looking. And then my friend realized something strange for the first time. Wait, there used to be 6. That day, a few friends got together to check the insides. Of the 6 colourful gourds, the red and pink ones were missing. They were similar in colour, so we had spoken about how it would have been cuter if there were different colours. There was no doubt they were the ones missing. The golden ceremonial arrow was gone too. She checked her bag carefully, but there was nothing there. She didn't even know how long they had been gone, let alone where they might be. But she also didn't care that much either. I mean, it's just a superstition anyway. It's not like anything's gonna happen because they're not there. And if I do find them again, it'll just be like, oh, nice, lucky, she said with a laugh. One day in autumn, the same month we went on that school trip, she died. She was riding home from the station after school on a Friday, and apparently had an accident. When I looked at her face during the wake, she looked beautiful, like she was just sleeping. When it was finally time to place her ashes in the urn before the 49th day after her passing, we visited her house to say our final goodbyes. On the altar was her portrait and ashes, as well as flowers and some fruit. But her school bag and broken phone that she had on her at the time were also there. That bag didn't look like it had been run over. It didn't look to be in poor condition at all. "Can I check her bag?" a friend asked, and then we looked inside. Her mother said that everything inside was the same as when the accident happened. My friend's hand stopped, and then she looked at all of us with tears forming in her eyes. She pulled her hand out of the bag, and the gourd strap was now just a lid and string. I don't know what that being missing and her death means, but when her mother saw that, she said something to us. "Oh, when did that disappear?" "I think it was there about a week before the accident, so maybe it fell off then." Maybe it was just a superstition. Maybe it wasn't. But the fact remains that my friend died. If you ever happen to visit Sannenzaka, then please be careful not to fall over there. Some friends driving through the mountains of Nara one night come across something so horrifying that afterwards they agree never to speak of it again, and in the end, never see each other again either. But why? Find out in Woman Climbing the Cliff. This happened when 3 of us guys went for a drive through the mountains of Nara one night. So, this place was deep in the mountains, with a lot of sudden curves and such. My friend and I were chatting in the back seat when suddenly the driver screamed, "Huh!" Both of us in the back jumped. What? What happened?" we asked. But he didn't reply. I had no idea what was going on, so I got a bit annoyed. "Quit screwing around, man. Jeez," I said, and then my other friend and I started chatting again. "Oh!" Again the driver screamed, but this time he also stopped the car. "What the hell are you doing?" I said, still annoyed, but when I saw his face dimly lit in the front seat, I could tell he was fully serious. My other friend in the back seat was still complaining, but now I was starting to feel a little worried. With the car stopped, I looked around and we were surrounded by pitch black darkness. There wasn't a single light, nor even a single sound. It took a little time before we finally got out of him what happened, but then we made him start the car again so we could see what he saw. The driver wanted to turn back, and said so several times, but we forced him to keep going ahead against his will. And then I saw it too. So did my other friend in the back. The driver wasn't exactly a scaredy cat, but he was nearly in tears. I was no doubt terrified as well, but my head was also kind of blank, like it was trying to take in what I'd just seen. Explaining it might dampen the mood, but you know when you're driving, the headlights are supposed to illuminate the road ahead of you, right? But when you come to a curve, then it also lights up an area off to the side of the road, yeah? Well, every time we took a sudden curve, the lights shone on a cliff in the distance, and there was something there. The driver didn't know what it was the first time he saw it, but as we got closer, it started to take shape, and he began to understand what it was. But it was only after taking a few curves that he clearly saw it for the first time. It was a woman in white, climbing the cliff. Before long, we were quite close to her, and it didn't take long for us in the back to see her clearly as well. She seemed to have something on her head, but we couldn't tell what. What we could tell was that she was dressed almost like a shrine maiden. But she didn't have any tools on hand, and appeared to be climbing the steep cliff with just her bare hands. A ghost? Hey, is that a ghost? The other guy asked several times. Shut up! The driver screamed. A shiver ran down my spine, and for some reason I couldn't get the Twilight Zone theme out of my head. As we reached the curve right beneath the woman, I suddenly realized the gravity of the situation. The woman was looking at us. Her pale, expressionless face was looking right down at us, frozen, as though she had been waiting for us. In the car's headlights, her eyes glowed. I don't remember what anyone said or who screamed at the time, but that set us off in a panic, and I don't think we were even saying actual words anymore. Sadly, we were going too fast to turn around. The driver was so scared that he was pushing down on the accelerator. And there was no space to turn around anyway, so we had to drive right beneath her on the cliff. Looking back on it now, it was a little strange, but when we finally got near her, nobody said or did anything. We were silent. I don't think it was because we were calm, but rather, we were so scared that we weren't brave enough to say or do anything. The inside of the car was so quiet you could hear a drop of water. And then, suddenly, the car stalled. I guess the driver messed up somehow, but it wasn't until the car started again that I truly tasted terror for the first time. Honestly, I was so scared that I thought I was losing my mind. Looking back on it now doesn't change anything, but I really did think I was going to go insane. All I could think about was how she was going to jump on the roof of the car, and then I'd see her pale face looking through the window at me. Once the engine started, that was the happiest I ever felt, and I screamed at the driver to get going. Go! Go! Right now! I screamed. He tore off at full speed, and I don't think any of us even breathed until we saw the lights of the city again. I remember the car was absolutely silent the whole way. After that, the three of us silently agreed to never speak of what happened ever again. And then, as time went on, we all went our separate ways in life. I'm no longer in touch with either of those guys, but I'm pretty sure they're still alive, even now. A young man notices something strange while riding home in Osaka one night. Something that he has never been able to find again since, and exists on no maps. What did he really come across? And was it even real to begin with? Find out in Iron Wall. When I was living in Osaka around 8 years ago, I experienced something really strange. There was this place in Namba with an iron wall about 4.5 meters high that runs alongside a road, and on the other side there's a factory area, and I'm wondering if anyone knows about it. The reason I ask is because I was 19 or so at the time, and I was hanging out with a friend late one night. It was around 1 a.m. and I was returning home on my bike. I thought I should go a different way to usual, and although I'd never gone that way before, I figured that if I just kept riding in the general direction of home, I'd get there eventually. It really was just something I did on a whim. So I rode down this road I didn't really know, and like I said before, on the right-hand side, there was this iron wall about 4 or 5 meters high, and on the left, there were lots of different factories. Here and there, you could see a few benches in front of the factories as well. Now, this iron wall had doors in it about every 100 meters. There were also outside lights, but they were pretty far apart, so the street was rather dark. And as I kept riding and riding, nothing around me seemed to change at all. I must have been on my bike for about 20 minutes, and it all looked exactly the same. I need to turn right to reach my house, but the wall just kept going and there was nowhere to turn. Suddenly, I found myself wondering what was on the other side of the wall, so I decided to head into the factory area to try to see over it. Standing on my bike pedals, I craned my neck to see over the wall, but I couldn't see anything nearby. Way in the distance, I could see some buildings and apartment lights, but that was it. I thought that I wouldn't be able to get home this way, so I decided to turn back. I rode pretty far though. And like I said, there were some benches around there, and on my way in, they were empty. But on my way back, now there were some people sitting on them. I saw 2 people chatting closely and eating bread or something. Looking closer, everyone on the benches were old guys. But it was after 1 a.m. Anyway, I ended up going back home my usual way. The next day, I told my friend what happened, and he said that sounded interesting. We decided to check it out together, but after that, we couldn't find it again. I've been curious about it all this time, and recently 6 of us friends tried to find it on Google Maps, but we couldn't find it there either. I wonder what that road was and where it would have led me if I kept going. Is there anyone who knows anything about it? And finally this week, a group of students in their final year of school decide to celebrate their last summer vacation with a trip to the Kansai area. After a few hiccups, they manage to secure a holiday home, but it appears there's a very good reason as to why it's been left empty for so long. Find out why in Holiday Home. This happened 2 years ago, and we were forbidden to talk about what happened, so I'll avoid mentioning concrete locations. I'll also omit any specific details, but if you're okay with that, then please feel free to read. This happened during the summer holidays of my final year at high school. We were all pretty exhausted from studying for tests, and it was our final summer holidays of high school, so 5 friends and I decided to take a trip somewhere. However, it was already summer, so if we wanted to go anywhere popular, we had to wait for previous reservations to cancel. It was pretty tough trying to find somewhere we could stay. At any rate, we found a pension in the sightseeing area of the Kinki region on the internet, and we figured that we wouldn't bother anyone if we were a little noisy there, so we reserved it right away. We left early in the morning on the day of our trip, and we arrived shortly before lunchtime. But then, a small problem arose. It seemed there had been some miscommunication between the travel agent and the people who managed the pension. We had arranged to stay for 3 days and 2 nights, starting that day. But it seemed the pension had us down for coming in 3 days' time. They didn't have a single room available right now. We complained that there was no way. We'd come all this way, what were we supposed to do now? At first, they suggested a hotel at the foot of the mountain, but we didn't come for sightseeing. We came here because it was in the middle of nowhere, and nobody would complain if we got a little rowdy at night. We refused to give in. Then, the person working there told us to wait, and started talking to someone on their phone. I didn't really catch what they were saying, but they were writing stuff down, and after a roughly 15-minute call, it seemed they had settled something. "There's a holiday home nearby if you'd like to stay there instead. We'll provide a 30% discount because of this mishap," they said. We agreed, but then things started to look not so good. It seemed that holiday home hadn't been used for a long time, and it would take some time to clean and get it ready. In the meantime, they gave us some tickets to the aquarium and covered our transport costs, and asked us to kill some time there until that evening. The aquarium was pretty far from the holiday home, like it was in a big city in the next prefecture, so by the time we were done and came back, it was already close to 6 p.m. How long has it been empty that it takes this much time? Maybe it's abandoned. This smells fishy. We all complained as we made our way towards the management office. A different man met us when we got back to the pension, but he told us the holiday home was now ready, so we walked about 15 minutes through the forest to reach it. It really was in the middle of the forest with nothing else around, so if we wanted to get rowdy that night, there would be nobody to complain about it. According to the man, the home hadn't been used in a while, so it took them a while to get it ready. But the electricity, water, and gas were working. Our cell phones wouldn't get any reception there, but there was a direct line to management, so there shouldn't be any problems. The man seemed kind of desperate and anxious, but there wasn't anything we could do about that at the time, so we went inside. Just how it looked on the outside, the inside also looked Western, and pretty old at that. It must have been built at least 30 or 40 years earlier, and the interior looked pretty old-fashioned as well. Still, it was pretty tidy, despite the fact it hadn't been used for a while. Although, when I think about it now, it was more like no traces of human use, rather than just being tidy. After the man briefly explained the residence to us, we carried our stuff upstairs, which wasn't too big but not too small either. And then we started getting ready to cook up a barbecue for dinner. But as the man was leaving, he said something strange. He said it was possible that bears might appear outside at night, so we shouldn't go out too late. For some reason, he made us promise not to go outside. The home was only about 15 minutes away from the pension and other buildings, so I was a little confused and suspicious. At any rate, I convinced myself that they just didn't want us walking around late at night because we might hurt ourselves or try to scare the other guests, and that was all. And so, the first day passed. After dinner, we took a random walk around the forest, played with some fireworks and video games, then we went to bed around 2 a.m. Nothing strange happened that night, but the next day, one of my friends said something strange. He claimed that he needed to go to the toilet during the night, and when he went, he heard the sound of drums outside. We told him he must have been imagining it, and in the end he agreed. But then that night, an incident occurred. We ate yakiniku till we were full for dinner, and then we had time to kill but nothing to do. So we decided to do a test of courage on a path we found in the forest earlier that day. But nothing happened during the test, and we were bored, so we returned to the holiday home. When we got there, a man in his late 20s or so was standing there, holding the doorknob. It was 10 p.m. We didn't think the caretaker would come at this late hour, so we approached slowly, wondering if maybe it was a thief. But the man just held the doorknob and didn't even turn around. We figured if he was a thief or someone suspicious, then he'd run when he heard our voices and footsteps. But we were only 10 meters from him, and still he didn't budge. It was creepy, but one of my friends, the guy who was basically our leader, and I walked over to him. "Hey, what are you doing?" We stood right next to him, but still he didn't move. "Hey, can you hear me?" my friend screamed as he grabbed the man's arm. But as soon as he did, my friend screamed again and jumped back. Why did he scream? Well, when he pulled on the man's arm, the area about 10 centimeters from his wrist bent like rubber, like he didn't have any joints. The other guys came over to see what was going on, and then the man turned to look at us for the first time. He looked like a regular guy, but his eyes were unfocused, like we couldn't tell where he was looking. His mouth also hung open with drool coming out of it, and then we realized his clothes were tattered, and he most definitely wasn't normal. As we stared in shock, the man then walked off into the forest, as if he didn't even see us. We were so shaken by what had just happened that we stood there frozen on the spot for a while. But we couldn't stay there forever, so when we finally came back to our senses, we rushed inside and locked the door behind us. We then checked the locks on all the doors and gathered in the living room. What the hell was that? A ghost? But you touched him. There's no way an arm could bend like that. We were panicking and getting worked up, and then outside, we heard a faint sound. Dong, dong, dong. It sounded like drums. The sound seemed to be slowly getting closer, and we all fell silent, straining to hear it. Once it sounded like it was in the garden outside, I couldn't take it anymore, and I flung the living room curtains open to look outside. I couldn't see very well in the darkness, but there was something large and round rolling towards us. The drum sound appeared to be coming from that round object, and every time it rolled, there was another sound. Dong, dong. Over and over it made this sound as it rolled towards the holiday home. It must have been 5 or 6 meters in size. Because I was staring at it, my friends got curious and came over to see what I was looking at. For a while, we all watched it in silence, but because it was dark, we couldn't really figure out what it was. We all just remained silent and watched it. Then, once it got close to the front door, the security light turned on. "What the hell is that? What the hell?" I screamed, quickly closing the curtain. But before I did, for just a moment, that thing was illuminated in the light, and I'm not sure how to really describe it, but it was like a mass of people. They were people of all ages, young, old, men and women, and like that man from before, their mouths hung open and their eyes were unfocused. Their bodies were entangled like their joints didn't matter, and dozens of these people made up one clump that was rolling around. Everyone there saw it, but we were too scared to say anything. We all sat together at the other end of the living room, trembling. What on earth is going on? What the hell was that? After a while, the drumming sound stopped. We continued to sit at the edge of the living room, unsure if the thing was gone or not, when suddenly something started violently banging on the front door. I covered my ears in fear and anxiety, and the other guys did the same. We did our best to wait it out, but then the banging sound started coming from all over the holiday home. Don, 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 don. It wasn't coming just from the windows, but the walls too, like a large group of people was banging everything they conceivably could. Let's call management. There's a line that goes directly to them, right? We need to get some help, one of my friends said, unable to bear it any longer. It hit us like lightning and we rushed to the phone by the door. I picked up the phone and pressed the button that said direct on it. After 2 or 3 rings, the guy that showed us around answered. I frantically told him what was going on, and then he muttered, as though talking to himself. Really? It appeared again? Then he sighed. I'll explain later, but there's a Kamidana altar in the living room, right? There are some charms and tape in there, so tape the charms to the door and then please wait. We didn't understand what he meant, but there was nothing else we could do, so we started searching the living room for the altar. It was near the roof in the corner, and so we used a chair to look inside. Like he said, there were some charms and tape in there. We quickly took them out, returned to the entrance, and then attached the charms to the front door and windows. As I taped the charms to the window, I did my best not to look outside. But for just a moment, I accidentally did. Several pale arms were banging on the window, and beyond those, I saw a human face whose position was far too unnatural compared to where the arms were. The eyes were again unfocused and the mouth hung open. I was too scared to even think about what was going on outside. And after what felt like hours, the banging on the doors and windows stopped as it was starting to get bright outside. But I still couldn't move, thinking that thing might still be out there. And so I remained on the spot until I heard the sound of a car in the distance. The car stopped in the garden outside, and then I heard several footsteps approaching. The doorbell rang, and a voice called out. Hey, are you okay? Thank God, we muttered. We ran outside, and the first person who greeted us at the pension, the guy who showed us around, and 3 other men were there. The 2 people we knew apologized to us. We're so sorry. It should be okay now, and we'll explain what's going on. But for now, you should get your stuff. You can leave the rubbish and whatnot though. And then we left the holiday home. We got in the car and they took us to a shrine. Seemed the other 3 men were from there. We were relieved and finally the tension was gone. We felt like we'd been saved, but then we also started to feel angry. Why the hell did you let us stay there? We screamed. And then the chief priest told us this story. That area was just a forest up until the mid-1960s. But then a few years later, people started to develop the land to turn it into a tourist attraction. Development proceeded smoothly. But once that holiday home was built in the mid-1970s, strange things started to occur. Nobody knew whether it was because of the home or not, but either way, people heard the sound of drums and started seeing that mass of people. The first owner of that holiday home, and then the next one, then went missing while they were staying there. The home was put up for sale, and the current management association picked it up to use as a rental. But that mass of people kept appearing. Nobody was harmed, but those who saw it continued to complain. So the chief priest performed a cleansing ceremony about 10 years earlier. After that, they stopped renting the property, but those who kept it clean and maintained it never mentioned seeing that thing again. So they figured it must be okay now, and then they let us rent it. And as a result, that led to the incident the night before. We were clearly victims in all this, so we complained endlessly. And in the end, the manager said that we'd have to pay for our transport and food costs ourselves, but he'd cover the rental fees for the home. And he'd talk to the agency to give us a large discount on the next time we travelled. However, he also asked us to keep quiet about what happened. We felt like he was trying to wheedle his way out of things, but it wasn't like the police would believe us even if we went to them, so we reluctantly agreed. As I said, I won't write concrete place names so as not to give the location away. Oh, and when I called the travel agency last year because of that discount, I asked them about that holiday home, and they said that it had been torn down, and the lot was now empty. A huge thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Just Sawn and Emerald. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 14, out on Amazon right now, and check out our merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.